Today's video is all about refining my kit selection for UTMB. Anyone who's competing will know there is a mandatory kit list, and I will be following that, but then in addition I do have a few other items that I always take over and above the mandatory. That is the bare minimum. But the aim of what I try and do is make my kit as light as possible, but without impacting my safety or any other competitors really. So it's about looking at requirements and then refining where I can. So in today's video I'm going to go a little bit more detail about that. Now, I've talked about running with all the mandatory kit for some of my previous long runs. So last week I did a 10-hour long run and I carried all the mandatory kit, including as if it was the warm weather requirement, which included an extra litre of water, so carrying 2 litres rather than 1 litre of water. But this video is all about if it's just a standard mandatory kit, and then also it's setting me up for a run tomorrow. So what I'm aiming to do is find out the difference in the kit and the weight between last week's long run and then this week's long run, which is going to be probably about half the duration of last week's long run. Now, coming a bit from a triathlon background, originally when I got into endurance sports it was doing triathlons, Ironman, extreme triathlons, things like Swissman, Keltman, Swedman extreme triathlons. And so looking at power to weight in particular for the bike became something which was quite important to me, following the kind of Team Sky, Team Ineos marginal gains, so looking at areas where I could potentially reduce the weight. And that was in part due to the amount of climbing. I've kind of taken that approach on when I've then moved into ultra running, and I did do a video a while back where I was using a stride power meter and increasing my weight with a weights vest to see the impact on the power output and heart rate of being slightly heavier. I'll put a link to that up there, so if you're interested in looking at that, feel free to check it out. But first off, I'm going to look at all the kit I had last week and then all the kit I'm hoping to take on race day if it is just a standard mandatory kit, and look at the difference, and I'll talk a little bit more in detail about what I do to maximise, or should I say minimise, the weight and the impact it will have on my speed. I mentioned about taking some additional things on top of the mandatory kit, so things like blister plasters, a body glide, body lubricant, things where I'd be carrying them to make sure that a silly little thing like a blister or a bit of chafing doesn't ruin the race for me. So I feel that the weight of those are definitely worth taking on top of the mandatory kit. In addition to the requirement for food and also 1 litre of water, I also carry things like energy drink and salts, because it's ones that I've trained with. I know they work really well for me, and so therefore on race day I take sachets of this with me as well, which is an additional, it's not a requirement, but it's something which I feel is worth the wait. Looking at the kit that I had with me the other day versus what I'm looking at carrying on race day, and the savings is in around 1.5 kilograms lighter. So things like, rather than carrying my full wallet, I'll just be taking cash and a card with me, so I don't require the full wallet, so there's a 100 grams saving there or so. I also swap out my mobile phone, which can save a little bit of weight, so I move from a smartphone to just a basic phone. The battery life is actually a lot better on it. It works in all 3 countries, which is one of the requirements. It's got roaming, so there's no issue with that, and it's a lot lighter as well. Things such as a first aid kit as well, I was carrying more than is on the required list, so I can cut that down a little bit for race day. And also another saving is in the region of water. So what I've been looking at and trialling with the Innovate backpack is with the long straws and having them coming up from down here and then feeding up. Now, looking at that, they're actually not difficult, but it's certainly easier to get the bottles in and out of the strap pockets rather than the ones down by your side. And also, if I have the bottles up here, it frees up more room in the side pockets for things that I'll need on the race. So my decision has been, assuming that it's not a warm weather race, to swap out the Innovate bottles with the long straw, so these ones here, and replace them just with a Salomon soft flask. Now, these are slightly heavier as well, but it's more just for the convenience of getting in and out of the pockets and not having space taken up by that water bottle. The other thing that I've done to the backpack, not weight related in the slightest, but there were a couple of little loops, green loops down at the bottom here, and there's also a zip. Now what I found when I had the zip open, which is where I keep my mandatory soft cup, was that every time I then went to zip up the pocket, I kept grabbing that loop. And it's one of those little things that is just a bit of a frustration over time. On training runs it's fine, but when you start doing it time after time, then I could see it getting slightly annoying. So I've tweaked that by just taking those two loops off. They're there for carrying poles, but my preferred option for pole location is actually on the front. So I have no requirement for having that there, which is why I've been able to remove them. If it is warm weather kit, then that will only be about half a kilo of saving, because with the extra water and things like that. But yeah, about 1.4, 1.5, and then with the extra watering kit. I also always carry sun cream with me, so I'll have that regardless of whatever the weather forecast is, because I can get sunburn when it is night time if it's a full moon. So yeah, be carrying that as well. That's another thing that I have as a nice to have. Additional things as well, things like toilet paper I always have with me. And one of the other areas where I actually take more than required is in the region of gloves. I have 2 pairs of gloves, 1 waterproof mitt and then some gloves, rather than just a single pair of gloves. The reason being is that if one pair get wet, it's always good to have a second pair if it's going to be really bad conditions or through the night. I don't want to be getting cold hands, because it just makes things more difficult trying to open food, for example, or getting in and out of the bag. So I don't want the issue of that on race day. So I always carry 2 pairs of gloves regardless, as it's just an extra thing. It's something which I've picked up. I also will be carrying, again, whether it's required or not, a full waterproof jacket, which is required, and then also a windproof jacket. And the main reason for that is it's somewhere in the middle. So I quite like having just a windproof jacket and the waterproof jacket. So if it's not raining but the wind's picking up, I find with a full waterproof I can overheat and get a bit sweaty, whereas with the windproof it's that middle ground, and for the weight, and it packs down really small, so for that extra weight I think it's well worth carrying it. It doesn't take up much space and it's barely anything. So that's another thing which I always take with me. The other thing that I'll be doing is refining my packing, so little things like carrying the poles. I noticed that one of the straps is slightly looser and one strap slightly tighter on the side, so I'm going to be tweaking the length of those to make sure they're both the same, so that I don't have the issue of having to double loop one side, and those little things which I can just refine ahead of the race. I hope you found this video useful. If you have, please make sure you subscribe to the channel and give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure you follow TMR Coaching on social media, there's links down below, and sign up to the TMR Coaching newsletter, where I send out a weekly newsletter with top training advice, and again there's a link to the website with the sign up form down below. I'll see you next time.